The voicemail was 6 seconds long. I've listened to it more times than I can count, and I can still hear every breath in it. My daughter's voice, low and shaking, 3 words and then nothing. "Dad, the garage, please." That was it. 6 seconds. And then the line went dead, and I was already moving before the phone was down, because I have known my daughter's voice for 25 years, and I've heard her scared before, and I've heard her being dramatic before. Her husband's family loved that word for her, dramatic, and this was neither of those. This was a voice with the bottom dropped out of it. This was my kid trying to be quiet so someone wouldn't hear her make the call. I called 911 from the truck before I'd even backed out of my driveway. I'll say that right up front, because a lot of what happened next depended on it, and because I need you to understand the kind of scared I already was. I didn't drive over there to check on my daughter and see if she was okay. I drove over there having already told a dispatcher to send police to that address, because 6 seconds of my daughter's voice had told me everything I needed to know, and it turned out I was right. And what I found in that garage, and what I did in the 20 minutes it took the police to get there, put 3 people in handcuffs before the night was over. I need to stop right here, 10 seconds in, because I know how this sounds, and I want to be honest about it. I am not a hero. I didn't do anything brave. What I did was refuse to be told my daughter was fine by people who had every reason to lie to me, and refused to leave when a smiling woman told me to, and that turned out to be enough. But the reason it was enough, the reason I didn't second-guess it, the reason I trusted 6 seconds over a whole dinner table of people telling me it was nothing, is a lesson I paid for, and I want to give it to you, because it might matter someday for someone you love. So, if you've ever had a feeling in your gut that something was wrong with your child, and had everyone around you tell you that you were overreacting, then stay with me, and go ahead and subscribe, because this is a story about what happens when you finally stop doubting the one thing you should never have doubted. Okay, let me back up. You need to understand my daughter, and you need to understand the word dramatic, because that word is the whole reason this almost went a very different way. My name is Frank Delgado. I'm 49 years old, and I've driven a delivery route for the same regional supplier for 22 years. It's steady, unglamorous work up before dawn, and it's given me one thing above all else that matters to this story. I know how to read a road, read a situation, read when something's off before I can say why. You develop that on the road, a sense for wrongness. I'd feel it about the whole situation with my daughter's marriage for a long time before I let myself act on it. And that's the part I have to live with. My daughter's name is Nora. She's 25, my only kid, and her mother passed when Nora was 16, so for the last 9 years it's been the 2 of us. Close. The way a widowed father and his daughter get close when they only have each other. Nora is not dramatic. I need to say that clearly because you're going to hear that word a lot in this story, and every time you hear it, I want you to remember that it was a lie somebody told on purpose. Nora is steady, she's careful. She's the kind of person who reads the instructions all the way through before she starts. In 25 years, my daughter has never once cried wolf, never once made a scene for attention, never once been anything other than measured about her own problems, sometimes to a fault, because she'd downplay things that were actually wrong rather than make anyone worry. 2 years ago, Nora got married. His name was Cole. And I'll be honest that I liked him fine at first. He was polite, he had a steady trade, he seemed to care about my daughter. He came from a family that ran a business together, an auto and salvage operation out on some acreage outside town, a big shop and a tow yard and a couple of houses on the same property, the kind of family compound where everybody works for the family and lives near the family and eats dinner with the family. Cole's mother, Marlene, ran the whole thing. She was the matriarch, a warm, chatty, grandmotherly woman who called everybody honey and always had a pie cooling. And I remember thinking at the wedding that Nora was marrying into a big close family, and that after losing her mother, maybe that was a good thing for her. I was wrong about almost every part of that, and it took me 2 years to see it. Because slowly, over those 2 years, my daughter changed. Not all at once. Just a little at a time, the way a person does when something is wearing on them that they can't talk about. She got quieter on our phone calls. She started canceling our lunches, always with a reason, always the family needing her for something. And when we did talk, she'd sometimes say things, small things, careful things, the way Nora says things when she's testing whether it's safe to say the bigger thing underneath. The family's just really private about the business, Dad. Cole gets weird if I ask questions about work. Marlene doesn't really like it when I go into the back shop. And I'd listen, and I'd say something reassuring, and I'd let it go. And here's the part I have to own, the part that I'll carry. Because somewhere in those 2 years, the family had started doing something, and it was so subtle that I didn't catch it until much later. They had started, carefully, consistently, telling everyone, including me, that Nora was dramatic, that she was anxious, that she read into things. Marlene would say it with such warmth, such concern, that it never sounded like an attack. We just worry about Nora. She gets so worked up over nothing, bless her heart. She's a little dramatic, Frank. You know how she is. And I didn't know how she was because that was not how she was, but I heard it enough times from enough of them that a little poison got into me. And the next time Nora said something worried, some small part of me thought, well, maybe she is getting worked up over nothing. There was one lunch, maybe 6 months before all this, that I replay constantly now. Nora had made it out to meet me, which was rare by then, and she was pushing her food around her plate, and she said, not looking at me, "Dad, do you ever feel like you're seeing something that everybody's telling you isn't there?" And I asked her what she meant, and she started to say something. And then she stopped and she looked at me. She was reading my face, I understand now, checking to see if I'd believe her. And I must have had some look on my face, some little bit of that word they'd planted in me, because whatever she saw made her change her mind. She smiled and said, "Never mind, I'm probably just tired." And she changed the subject. And I let her. I let my daughter test whether it was safe to tell me the truth, and I failed the test. And she filed it away that her own father was one more person who'd think she was imagining things. I would give a great deal to have that lunch back. They were building a wall around my daughter, one brick at a time, and the bricks were made out of a single word, and I helped them lay a few of those bricks without ever knowing I was doing it. Because when the people around a person all agree that she's dramatic, then when she finally screams, nobody comes. That's what the word is for. That's the whole reason they use it, and it very nearly worked. Let me tell you what was actually happening on that property, because I found out most of it that night and the rest in the weeks after, and it reframes every worried thing my daughter ever tried to tell me. The family business was a front. The legitimate part, the auto repair, the towing, the salvage, was real enough to explain the trucks coming and going at all hours, real enough to launder the money. But the actual business, the one that made the real money, was stolen cars. It was a chop shop, and not a small one. Vehicles would get stolen, sometimes from 3 states over, and brought to that back shop on the property. And there they'd be stripped for parts, or given new identities, the VIN numbers, the identification numbers that are supposed to be unique to every car, ground off, and replaced with numbers from wrecked cars they'd bought at salvage auctions, so a stolen truck could be sold as a legitimate rebuilt one. It's a real crime, an organized one, and it's more common than people think, and it takes a whole crew working together to run it. Marlene ran it. Her sons worked it. Cole, my son-in-law, and his brother Cody. It was the family. Business, all right. The family just left out what the business actually was, and Nora had married into it without knowing. That's the thing I need you to understand about my daughter. She didn't marry a criminal knowing he was one. She married a man whose family ran a shop, and it took her almost 2 years living on that property, seeing the wrong things, to slowly understand what she'd married into. And every time she got close to understanding, every time she asked a question, the wall went up. Cole got weird. Marlene steered her away from the back shop, and the whole family, in that warm, concerned way, reminded everyone that Nora was dramatic, so that if she ever did figure it out and try to tell someone, she'd already been established as a girl who reads into things. They were managing her. For almost 2 years, that whole family was managing my daughter, keeping her close enough to control and confused enough to doubt herself. And I was 3 lunches a month away and hearing, "She's a little dramatic, Frank," and nodding along. Here is what happened on the day of the voicemail, as best as I've been able to piece it together from Nora and from what came out later. Nora had finally seen too much. A few days earlier, she'd found something. Paperwork, in the house, that she wasn't supposed to see. Titles and numbers that didn't match, and it had been enough to turn all her small worries into one large certainty. And my daughter, being who she is, did not fly off the handle. She didn't scream or run. She did the careful, measured Nora thing, which in this case was also the most dangerous thing. She decided to be sure before she said anything, and she went out to the back shop that afternoon when she thought it was empty, to look, to confirm what she now suspected, so that she wouldn't be, that word, dramatic. So that when she came to someone, she'd have it right. It wasn't empty. Cole was there, and Cody, and they saw her in the back shop where she was never allowed, looking at exactly the thing she was never supposed to see. A stolen vehicle, mid-strip, its ground-off VIN plate sitting right there on the bench. And they knew that she knew. And in that moment, my daughter's marriage ended, and something much worse began, because Cole looked at his wife and he made a choice, and the choice was his family over her. They didn't hurt her. I want to be clear about that because it matters and because it's true. This isn't that kind of story, and I'm grateful every day that it isn't, but they took her phone. And they kept her out there in the shop, while they called Marlene in from the house, and the three of them stood around my daughter deciding what to do about the problem she had become. Not hurting her, just keeping her. Talking, in low voices, about a woman like she wasn't standing right there, about what she'd seen and who she might tell, and how much of a problem it was going to be, while she stood against a workbench understanding fully now that the people she'd married into were not going to just let her walk out to her car and drive away. And here is where my daughter did the bravest thing I've ever heard of, and the reason she's alive and free to be brave about anything ever again. Because in that shop, terrified, phone taken, 3 people between her and the door, she waited. She stayed calm. The careful, measured, downplaying instinct that had almost cost her everything now saved her. Because instead of panicking, she watched, and she waited. And when Marlene called the 2 men over to look at something on the far bench, for just a few seconds, Nora saw that her phone was sitting on a stool 6 feet away where Cody had set it down. And she walked over, casual, like she was just moving. And she picked it up, and she turned away. And with her body between the phone and the room, she called the one number she knew by heart, and she didn't dare speak above a breath. And she got out 6 words before Cody turned around. "Dad, the garage, please." And then Cody saw and took the phone back, and that was the end of the call. But it was too late for them, because by the time Cody's hand closed around that phone, the call had already connected, and it had already gone to voicemail, and those 6 seconds of her voice were already saved on a server somewhere, and I was already listening to them, and I was already reaching for my keys. The drive to that property normally takes me 25 minutes. I made it in about 15, and I spent the whole time on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, and I have to tell you about that call, because it's the part people skip in these stories, and it's the part that actually mattered. I did not call 911 and scream that my daughter was being held hostage, because I didn't know that yet, and if I'd said something wild, they might have taken me less seriously. I told the dispatcher exactly what I knew, calmly, because a lifetime of driving taught me that panic makes people not believe you. I said, my adult daughter just left me a voicemail that was 6 seconds long, that she sounded terrified and was clearly trying to be quiet, that she said only, "The garage, please," that she lives on a property with her husband's family with whom she's been having escalating problems, and that I was en route and I needed an officer to meet me there because I did not believe she was safe. I gave the address. I gave Nora's name and description. I stayed calm and I stayed specific, and because I did, that dispatcher believed me, and she told me units were being dispatched, and she asked me to stay on the line, and she asked me not to go in alone. I told her I couldn't promise that. I told her that was my daughter, and to her credit, she didn't waste breath arguing with the father about the impossible. She just kept me talking and kept the officers coming. The dispatcher kept me talking the whole way, and I'm grateful for it because otherwise I don't know what my mind would have done to me in that truck. Every red light was a year. I kept the voicemail playing in my head on a loop, those 6 seconds, and every time it looped I heard something new in it. The way her voice dropped on garage, like she was pointing. the way please came out already knowing she might not get another word. My daughter had rationed her fear into 3 words because she knew she only had 3 words. I have delivered parts through ice storms, and I have never gripped a wheel the way I gripped it on that drive. I turned onto that property and I saw the houses in the big shop out back, and I saw the lights on in the main house, and I did something that I think saved everything, which is that I didn't go screaming up to the shop. I pulled up to the house, normal, like a father stopping by, because some instinct told me that if I came in hot, they'd have a reason and a warning to do something drastic, and if I came in calm, they'd think they still had control of the situation. So I walked up to that house and I knocked on the door like it was any other evening, and Marlene answered it, and behind her, at the dining table, was a scene I will never forget as long as I live. The whole family, sitting down to dinner. Cole, Cody, a couple of others, plates full, a pie on the counter, the television on low, eating dinner. Like it was nothing. Like there was nothing at all happening on that property, like my daughter wasn't out in that shop with her phone taken, like the most ordinary evening in the world was underway. They had all come inside and sat down to eat, to look normal, because a normal family eating dinner is the best alibi there is, and they were nothing if not good at looking normal. And Marlene smiled at me, that warm grandmother smile, and she said, "Frank, what a surprise. Everything okay?" And I said I'd gotten a strange call from Nora, and I wanted to see her. And Marlene's face did something very small and very practiced, a flicker of warm concern, and she said, "Oh, Frank, she's having one of her nights. You know how she gets. She got herself all worked up over some nonsense and stormed off. She's out sulking somewhere. Honestly, I think she just wants attention. She's being dramatic again. Come in, have some dinner, she'll come around." She's being dramatic again. And I want to tell you what happened inside me when she said that, because it's the whole point of this story. For 2 years, that word had worked on me. For 2 years I'd heard it and nodded and let a little poison in. And standing on that porch, hearing that woman use my daughter's fear as a punchline to get me to sit down and eat pie, something in me that had been asleep for 2 years woke all the way up. Because I'd just heard those 6 seconds. I knew what my daughter actually sounded like when she was scared, and it was nothing like worked up over nonsense. And in that instant, every worried thing Nora had ever carefully tried to tell me came back at once, and I understood, completely and finally, that I had been lied to for 2 years by a woman who was smiling at me right now and offering me pie. So I didn't argue with her. Arguing would have warned her. I just said, "Where's the garage, Marlene?" And I watched her smile change. And I walked past her, right past her, into that house, and she said, "Frank." And I heard chairs scrape behind me as men stood up, and I did not run, and I did not stop, I just walked, fast, through that house and out the back and across the yard toward the big shop with its lights on, and behind me I could hear them coming, Cole's voice saying, "Frank, hey, hold on, man," in that reasonable tone people use when they're trying to slow you down, and I did not slow down because my daughter had said please, and I was going to that garage. I hit that shop door with them right behind me and pulled it open, and I saw 2 things in the same glance, and I've never forgotten either of them. The first thing I saw was my daughter. Nora was standing at the back of that shop, against a workbench, her arms wrapped around herself, and when she saw me come through that door her whole face crumpled, because she had made that call not even knowing if it connected, not knowing if I'd heard, not knowing if anyone was coming, and she'd been standing there for the longest hour of her life not knowing. And then her dad came through the door. I have been her father since the day she was born, and I have never seen relief like that on a human face, and I hope I never have to again, because to see relief that big you first have to see fear that big. And the second thing I saw, in the same glance, was why. Because the shop was full of it. A vehicle up on a lift, half stripped, panels off. Parts everywhere, organized, cataloged, a real operation. And on the workbench, right next to where they'd been keeping my daughter, in plain sight, a stack of little metal plates and a grinder. And I didn't know the details yet, but I didn't need to. I'd driven past enough of the world to know a chop shop when I was standing in one, and to know that a family didn't keep a woman out here against her will over an honest business. And I made a decision in about 1 second. And it's the decision that put 3 people in handcuffs. So here is what it was. It was not to fight anybody. There were 3 men behind me, and I'm 49, and I deliver auto parts for a living. I fight nobody. And it was not, God help me, to grab my daughter and run, though every cell in my body wanted to, because I knew if I turned and ran with her they might do anything. No. What I did was take out my phone and hold it up and start recording. Video. Panning slowly across that shop, the stripped vehicle, the parts, the bench, the grinder, the plates, and then to my daughter, and then to the 3 of them standing in the doorway. And I said, out loud, calm, for the recording and for them, "Police are already on their way. I called them 15 minutes ago. They'll be here any second. Everybody's on camera. Nora, come stand by me." And I watched it land on them, because that changed the entire math of the situation in an instant. Up until that second, in their minds, this was a containable problem. Nora hadn't told anyone. They had her phone. They could talk their way through, manage it like they managed everything. And now, here was her father, who had already called the police 15 minutes ago, standing in their shop filming their entire operation, with the cops minutes out. There was no managing that. There was no version of the next 10 minutes where the police showed up to a chop shop with a filmed record of it, and a terrified woman and her father, and everybody walked away clean. It was over, and I watched all 3 of them understand that, and then watched them do the thing people do when the walls come down. Come apart in different directions. Cody wanted to run. He actually took a step toward the side door, and Marlene, who had come out behind them, said his name, sharp, the grandmother gone completely out of her voice now, replaced by the person who'd been running a criminal enterprise for God knows how long, and told him running would only make it worse. Cole just stood there, staring at Nora, and I could see something breaking in him. Too late, way too late. Some understanding of what he'd done, and what he'd become, and what it was going to cost. And Marlene looked at me, and she dropped the whole act, every bit of it, and she said cold and flat, "You should have stayed for dinner, Frank." Cole said one thing to me, in that shop, while we waited for the sirens. He said, low, "Frank, I never wanted her hurt. You have to know that. I was going to figure it out." And I looked at the man who'd married my daughter, who'd stood in this shop with 2 other people between his wife and the door, and called it figuring it out, and I felt something I didn't expect, which wasn't rage. It was pity, almost. Because he believed it. He actually believed that loving her a little while he helped trap her made him different from the others. And I said the only true thing I had for him, "You had one job, Cole. When she got scared, you were supposed to be the one she called. She called me." And he didn't have anything to say to that, because there's nothing to say to that. It's the whole indictment of him in one sentence, and he knew it. And I said, "Nora, come here." And my daughter walked across that shop on shaking legs, past her husband, who did not try to stop her, and she came and stood beside me, and I put my body between her and all of them, and I kept that camera up, and I said, "We're just going to wait now. Won't be long." And it wasn't. Maybe 90 seconds later I heard the first siren, and then I saw the light bars coming up the long drive, 2 units, then a third, and I have never in my life been so glad to see anybody as I was to see those officers come through that shop door, and everything after that happened fast and out of my hands, which was exactly how I wanted it. I'm not going to pretend I know every legal detail of what happened next, because the honest answer is that these things take months, and it got complicated, and I'm still learning pieces of it. But the shape of it is what matters, and the shape I can give you. The police walked into a stolen vehicle operation caught in the act, with a father's video record of the whole shop, and a woman who'd been held there against her will telling them exactly what had happened. That's not a he said, she said. That's a scene. And within about an hour, 3 people were in handcuffs. Marlene, the matriarch, the one who'd smiled and offered me pie, she was the one they were most interested in because it very quickly became clear to them, the way it had become clear to me, that she wasn't a grandmother whose sons had gotten into trouble. She was running it. The whole thing. Her sons worked for her. Cole, my son-in-law, went in handcuffs too for his part in the operation and for what they'd done to Nora that night, which turned out to have its own set of very serious charges attached to it. Keeping a person somewhere against their will is a crime with a name and a sentence, it turns out, even when you don't lay a hand on them. And Cody, the brother, who'd taken her phone and tried to run, Went in the third car. 3 people in handcuffs. Just like I said at the start. But here's the thing I most need you to hear, which is that it wasn't me who did that. People have said to me since, "You're a hero. You took down a whole crime ring," and it makes me a little sick every time because it's not true and it misses the entire point. I didn't take down anything. My daughter did. Nora is the one who noticed, over 2 years, when everyone was telling her she was imagining things. Nora is the one who was careful enough to be sure and brave enough to go look. Nora is the one who, terrified, phone taken, 3 grown adults blocking the only door, kept her head and waited and got 6 words out to the one person she knew would come. I didn't save my daughter that night. My daughter saved herself and used her last 6 seconds to tell me where to point the police. All I did was believe her and show up and hold up a phone. The bravery was all hers. It was always all hers. I learned some things about Marlene later that still turned my stomach. That warm grandmother act wasn't a disguise she put on for company. It was a tool, and she'd been using it for decades. The detectives told me she'd run versions of this for a very long time, that the folksy pie-baking matriarch was exactly how she'd never been the one anyone looked at, that she let her sons take the visible risks while she ran the money and made the decisions from a kitchen that always smelled like something baking. And the dramatic campaign against my daughter. The detectives had seen it before, too. It has a shape. You isolate the person who's figuring it out. You get everyone around them to agree she's unstable, and by the time she's sure enough to say something out loud, she has no credibility left to say it with. Marlene hadn't invented cruelty. She'd just perfected the polite kind, the kind that smiles and offers you pie while it takes your daughter apart. And the operation, once it was pulled open, went a lot deeper than that one shop. Because a chop shop that size doesn't exist alone. It's a node in something bigger. A network of people who steal the cars and people who move the parts and people who launder the money. And my daughter's 6-second voicemail turned out to be the thread that, when the police pulled it, unraveled a lot more than one family's business. I don't know where all of it ends, even now, but it started with a careful young woman who wouldn't stop trusting her own eyes, and a father who finally remembered to trust her too. There's a moment from that night that I'll keep for the rest of my life, and it wasn't the arrests. It was later, after the statements, after the officers had what they needed, when I finally got to take my daughter home. She sat in the passenger seat of my truck, the same truck I'd made that drive in, and for the first few minutes she didn't say anything, just stared out the windshield. And then she said, so quietly I almost missed it. I didn't know if it connected, the call. I didn't know if you heard it. I called you, and I hoped. And I had to pull over, because I couldn't drive and hear that at the same time. And I told her the truth, that I'd heard it, and been in the truck before it even finished, that I would always hear it, that in no version of my life does she call me and I don't come. And she cried, finally, the crying she hadn't been able to do out in that shop, and I held my grown daughter across the console of a delivery truck on the side of the road and let her cry it out, and it was the worst and best night of my life at the same time. Now, let me tell you about Nora, because a crime ring getting busted is not actually the point of this story. My daughter is the point. She's okay. It's going to take a while, and she's doing the work. She's talking to someone, a good counselor, because 2 years of being systematically told you're crazy when you're not does something to a person that doesn't heal on its own. She had to unlearn the doubt they'd put in her, had to relearn that her instincts were good all along, that she wasn't dramatic, that she was right. That's a longer recovery than people think, but she's got it back, more of it every week. The measured, careful, clear-eyed daughter I raised, she's still in there, she was always in there. They just buried her for a while under a word. The divorce was quick and it was clean, mostly because it's hard to contest a divorce from a jail cell. Nora moved back in with me for a while, into her old room, and I won't lie to you, having my girl back under my roof, safe, even under those circumstances, was the closest thing to a gift I've gotten since her mother died. We're closer now than we've been since she was a kid. We do our lunches again, every week, no cancellations. And we talk about the real things now, because we both learned the hard way what it costs to have a wall of politeness between a father and a daughter who love each other. There's one more thing, and it's the thing I think about most. I still have that voicemail, 6 seconds. Dad, the garage, please. And I've thought 100 times about deleting it, because it's a terrible thing to keep, the sound of my child at the worst moment of her life. But I can't delete it, and I've figured out why. It's not because I want to remember how scared she was. It's because I need to remember how close I came to not believing her. I need to remember that for 2 years, people told me my daughter was dramatic, and I let a little of that in. And if those 6 seconds had come on a night when I'd let a little more of it in, if I'd heard the garage please and thought, oh, there she goes again, I might have finished my dinner. I might have called her in the morning. And I don't let myself look away from that because it's the most important thing I'll ever know. That the people who want to hurt someone you love will almost always try to convince you first that she's not worth believing. And the day you stop believing her is the day they win. So, let me leave you with one question, and I really do read these, so tell me. Has someone you love ever tried to tell you something was wrong, in their own careful way, and been waved off? By you, or by everyone around them? Did you listen? I'd genuinely like to know. Because I've learned that the most dangerous word in the world is dramatic, and the most important thing a person can do for someone they love is to believe them the first time, before the 6-second voicemail, before it's almost too late. And if this story meant something to you, do me one small kindness before you go. Leave a comment, even a single word, so I know you stayed with us all the way to the end. And then, tonight, call the person in your life who's been trying to tell you something, and this time, really listen. Because sometimes the whole difference between a tragedy and a phone call you make it to in time is just one person, finally, deciding to believe.